is just a reference to a few things today. Eyes Wide Shut, Epstein. Well, there are a number of analysts of Stanley Kubrick's work who have pointed out the subtext in Eyes Wide Shut, hinting at Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman's characters giving their children to the predatory elite. And the whole show is about, the whole movie, Eyes Wide Shut, is about this, not just the masked ball and the sex cult at the core of this thing, but also it hints at human trafficking. And the symbols include, teddy bears and stuff. But at the end, it's pretty unequivocal. They give their kids to these guys that were at the party. And this is a Stanley Kubrick film, which, again, it dropped 7/16/1999, the day JFK Jr. died. Now, that's interesting for a whole other reason. The Kubrick films tended to be released on days significant to JFK. For example, 11/22/63, he releases Dr. Strangelove, which happened to kick off a lot of it was about the fluoride in the water hoax, in part. So he releases that 11/22. Apollo 11, which is another Stanley Kubrick movie, launched from the Kennedy Space Center on 7/16. And JFK Jr. dies on 7/16/1999, the day that this movie Eyes Wide Shut comes out. And there's a pretty strong subtext contained in Eyes Wide Shut where you could connect it to the death of JFK Jr., even pointing out that Tom Cruise could be representative of a JFK Jr. having faked his death. And there's references in the film. Just as there's a reference to Stanley Kubrick's death in the film, which, again, this is all kind of nuanced, but there's a lot in Eyes Wide Shut, as there are with Kubrick films in general. But in particular, Eyes Wide Shut is hinting at this elite control, trafficking, and such. And so it makes me think about the Epstein story, which I'm suggesting is a hoax. And the reason why there's a hoax of this nature is that it was targeting the far right to get them to accept the basic premise of woke rightism, which is control over the world by Israel. That's the basis of the Epstein story. But the fact is, right now, Donald Trump comes out and he says the whole thing is fake and that his base got tricked into it. So he's more or less calling it a hoax that scammed his own base, just like these other Democrat hoaxes. And this is seen as many as a betrayal. He's turning his back on his base. MAGA's dead. And I'm saying, no, this is consistent. I mean, think back to how many times the Trust the Plan people thought that Donald Trump was about to release the files about the deep state, expose the deep state. They've been dangling this carrot since like 2015, 2016. They've been dangling the carrot, the QAnons have, and they attached the Epstein story to their own mythology about adrenochrome, about children in tunnels. They attached all this stuff to the Epstein narrative, which bolstered it in their eyes. It made it into something it wasn't. It was never this big thing. It was always a collective confabulation, not unlike Pizzagate. So my question here is, why is it considered to be a betrayal for Trump to call this a hoax when he never validated the QAnon story? And think back to 11/22/2021, Dealey Plaza, where a bunch of diehard MAGAs were hanging out, waiting for JFK to show up and overturn the election. And no, Ghislaine Maxwell's not going to talk. That was a fake news story. She has nothing. There isn't anything. There's no there. When people say the client list, they have this idea of things, but it's all narrative. It's all fake. There is no blackmail control by Mossad over American politicians. And as I predicted, no evidence means they're going to believe it harder. So for the people who already believe it's true, now it's going to look like a cover-up. And what this does, it extends the shelf life of the story. The story never has to end. It's a cover-up, like UFOs, like Area 51, alien abduction, No, I'm sorry, alien autopsies, Area 51. What happened with Area 51? A cover-up. And now here we are, many decades later, and the Pentagon reveals it was never real in the first place. So I'm pointing out here that whenever there's a psyop, you have to look beyond the reactions people are having and get to what is the purpose of this particular psyop and who is it targeting. Okay, so if you look, the regular neocon conservatives, pro-Israel types don't care about the Epstein story. None of them do. They all got their marching orders, and they're all walking lockstep along the lines of this doesn't matter, which looks very suspicious to the woke right, the anti-Israel crowd, who believe that this thing was going to expose Mossad in Israel. So you have this schism on the right because one half doesn't believe the Epstein thing matters, and the other side is saying, no, it's a cover-up, and they cannot release the files because they will lose their blackmail power. They'll lose their control, their leverage. So that's what people are saying. The woke right are saying they don't want to lose their blackmail, so they're not going to release the stuff. That Trump is a part of it, and that's why he got his big, beautiful bill passed. So no evidence, and the story continues. But my point here is, Trump didn't just suddenly change his mind. They didn't get to him and get him to not release it. There was never any intention to release anything because there was never anything. Just like QAnon was never anything. Just like JFK coming back from the dead was always going to be a hoax. So if you look at the people waiting for JFK to come back at 107 years old, back in Dealey Plaza a few years ago, you might laugh at them and say, okay, well, they were fooled. But who fooled them? Psychological operations promulgated by agents. Like, they were misled. They didn't just spontaneously arrive at the wrong conclusion. No, there was a lot of people who were being deliberately misled. You know, you have Elvis impersonators or Elvis sightings. There were JFK Jr. sightings. There were dozens of big accounts, I'm talking big X accounts, whose sole purpose it was to spread the rumor that JFK was coming back, or JFK Jr. This was deliberately spread by a group of people who created this echo chamber full of bots and happy emojis, lots of hearts. So they were love bombing anybody who would jump into their clique. Look, I have a JFK Jr. fan club account on X, and I just opened it, and it's got thousands of followers. I don't even use it. I was just seeing how many gullible people are out there. So what I'm suggesting here is that they created that whole narrative, that whole spectacle, because that's what they do. They're manufacturing mythology. And you can laugh at those people and say, oh, they fell into a cult. Well, the thing is, that's just a subset of the cult that the rest of the MAGAs are in. The whole Make America Great thing is a big psyop. It's all just a demographic of people who've been put in like a petri dish. And look what they've done with all the conspiracy theorist people. And I watched all this firsthand. I learned about white hats firsthand when this thing rolled out. And I was told, oh, there's this list of people, and they're all going to be exposed, and Trump's going to bring about the Great Awakening. Well, look, I think we can drop it. 7 years later, your Great Awakening hasn't happened. He got his votes out of you for as many terms as he can get. What else possibly could there be? But mainly it's this, though. It's that the part of the right wing that is now being labeled woke right, their whole premise is based on this idea of centralized power or control over the world domination by a certain group. And that whole story, it has evidence if the Epstein story is revealed to be true. That, look, this particular country has been running a sting or a blackmail operation for years out of this island. Like, it's a cool story, bro, but it's been fake the whole time. And here's something else to consider. Why would that be true if January 6th was staged? If 7/13/2024 was fake? Like, if Trump staged an assassination attempt, then what makes you think that he would be somehow releasing some information that would expose the supposed deep state when they could just say, hey, Donald, if you try to reveal the names and what we all did and reveal the videos, we're going to tell everybody that January 6th was a hoax. It doesn't make sense. The whole story falls apart if you have continuity. So if you look at these things in isolation as anomalies, miss the forest for the trees, you may not arrive at the right conclusions, but these things have to build on each other. So for example, Apollo 11, if that's a hoax, then what about Apollo 12? What about Apollo 10? What about the space shuttles? Every subsequent production from the same production crew logically builds upon what came before, and if what came before is fake, it can't suddenly become real. If they up their special effects at NASA and make a convincing moon base, you still have to consider everything else before that looked really fake. Rear screen projection, green screen, bad AVR glitches. So the idea of treating everything in isolation without context, I think explains it all here. How can you look at the Epstein thing as somehow valid while simultaneously holding in your mind the fact that January 6th was faked and Butler was faked, that Q was fake? There's a pattern here. And the pattern here is this. The fake news isn't a small detail. It's not like a force multiplier. Like once in a while we'll fake something. No, these aren't isolated influence operations. No, it's rather the strategy itself. It's intrinsically built upon fakery. And why is that? Well, it's not just because fake is more expedient or efficient. It's because they're controlling the historical narratives as they produce them on the world stage. So if you have a prefabricated history, you can't leave anything up to chance, so you things. Your fake news gets priority. And so these are fake events that are necessary for the structure of the world stage to remain controllable. So they need the far, far right to believe in this blood libel, which has been repackaged as Pizzagate, as Epstein. They need this paradigm intact. That's why it's not going to change. So what they've done here is actually a genius move, because without showing evidence of, Stephen Hawking's in the back of Lolita Express abusing children or whatever they're alleging, without evidence, they could, with just the belief it happened and the suggestion of a cover-up, they can keep this story going for decades. And that's what's going to happen. Look what they did with the JFK assassination psyop. They dragged that out for years and years, and who did they ultimately blame it on? Think about this too. Just a few months ago, they were talking about releasing the JFK files and the Epstein files. Well, that never happened. But who were these both going to be blamed on? According to the woke right, JFK was killed by Israel. Epstein, Israel. You see a connection here? The cover-up is to cover up who's really behind it all. It's like this very obvious conspiracy, and I don't anticipate that it's ever going to be solved, because the conspiracy is the strategy. I call it the meta-conspiracy. That all these various conspiracy theories aren't true, and none of them will ever be revealed, but they need you to believe in these conspiracies, because that's what makes you manageable. You're suspicious about this group, your whole worldview now gets warped on that premise. Think about how wokeism works. If you believe all of a sudden that the man controls everything and you're oppressed because you're a woman or you're not white, or you think that the system itself is against you, you can have confirmation bias, which might reinforce that, but then you throw in the accelerant of all the propaganda that gives you all the more reason to think it's true. So you can easily become radicalized into a worldview because now you've accepted a faulty premise that this person, this group, is the oppressor. That's wokeism in a nutshell. It's about oppressors and the oppressed. Well, the right has an oppressor, and they are the oppressed. That's why they always talk about white genocide, and they're all for tribalism. And I'm encountering them all the time on X, and I get accused of being Mossad and Israel and stuff, and it's like, you know what? I'm not playing your game. I'm not in your alt reality game. I say, consider me an alien anthropologist. Graham Siltzenberg, our newest wrench holder, says, can confirm I used to be super conspirolo. Oh, yes. You're big into conspiracies, thanks to the deprogram. And I was too. And so what people will ask is like, well, which conspiracies are true when they talk to a conspiracy theorist? And the conspiracy theorist has a bunch of narratives they're trying to sell. And what they don't know is every red pill conspiracy exists within the MSM box. So you're not getting outside of the worldview that they've programmed you into, the one you don't trust because you think the news is faked. You're not getting out of it with red pill ideology. And when I say red pill ideology, I'm referring to a belief system built upon the world's being lied to, it's being deceived, and the bad guys are fill in the blank. You know, adrenochrome, drinking, vampires, reptilians. I was watching a Mr. E video. He says we're ruled by gender nonconformist, elite people who switch everything and all the presidents are women. I mean, they have all these various wokeisms where people have woke up to the ultimate truth. 10 years ago, the ultimate truth was we're ruled by reptilians. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you look back, you'd probably find something else. But it's always been variants of the same story. And the point of it is, the story's fake. One side believes the world's being oppressed by Western values and whites. The other side thinks it's being oppressed by Israel and secret cabals of blood drinkers. But these are meta conspiracies. These are like big conspiracies under which many smaller conspiracies can fit. So left and right are both built on what are essentially misleading narratives, which are what conspiracy theories are. Alternative explanations to explain what hasn't been explained in a satisfactory way. But they are bad faith explanations planted by operatives, influence agents. And we can prove this. Mirage Men. The entire UFO phenomenon. This is such a big deal because of how popular it is. But it's also a good example of how little the truth matters when people have accepted a belief system. Because the UFO cult has not really budged an inch after the Pentagon revealed that Area 51 is a hoax, that there is no alien presence there. No, I mean, we have one of the best examples here of government influencing popular culture with the UFO phenomenon. The entire UFO mythology is an admitted government hoax, and yet people are still following it. And as I said before, there's the reason why they say that this is exactly like the Epstein thing. The UFO people are saying the reason why the Pentagon is saying they made it up is because they don't want us to look anymore. It's a cover-up. So now they're saying the aliens are realer than ever because there's no evidence. And with the Epstein thing, no list gets dropped. Now it's a cover-up. Now it's even more real. So you see the pattern here. Same psychological operation template here. Same result. You tell them it's a fake, you deny the evidence, and the believers will believe even harder in the absence of evidence. It's kind of paradoxical, but you could attribute this to the sunk cost fallacy and even addiction. You know, there's a component here of addiction when it comes to the process of being pandered to by someone like Trump. Occasional dog whistles, he'll draw a Q in the air. There'll be a hint that the people will see. So like, oh yeah, he's winking at us. Q's real. Do you remember when Trump once said, he was in Ohio giving a speech, and somewhere with like Whirlpool washing machines, and he said something kind of ominous about how he was possibly not going to be seen for a while. Just some random statement he said. But there were 17 washing machines behind him. So the Q people said, oh, that's him talking to us. 17 is Q. And he's going to go underground and they're going to fight the deep state. And the Whirlpool washing machine has to do with the storm. So they would come up with these elaborate stories and then nothing would happen. But the point of it is, whenever they're given a dog whistle, a wink, a nod, that's validation. And that little bit of validation vindicates all their hard work. So their sunk cost, all their emotional energy, their social capital they invest into it. It's like money in a slot machine. It's not wasted if you have the occasional win, but it's the intermittent reinforcement, the intermittent wins, the seeming little victories that make it all worthwhile, and they forget the misery and the disappointment of the consistent losing. So it's very cruel the way they're being dragged along with the idea that eventually talking about Epstein and the deep state is going to pay off. I am part of the Great Awakening. And eventually all the family members that disown me because my red hat are going to come around thanking me. And that's never going to happen. Let me go through your comments. Psy Girl says, and Ehud Barak was a major client and partner of Epstein for over 2 decades. Yeah, look, I considered the Epstein story to be as reliable as the story about OBL and the hijackers. Remember OBL and the hijackers starring roles on 9/11? And then you have all kinds of conflicting narratives about where they went. Like, why would you believe any of it? My point of it is this. What is your source? Because if any part of it is faked, any part of it's used in an influence operation, you just have to drop it all as contaminated, useless misinformation, propaganda. And it all comes down to, if true, then all of my beliefs about Israel controlling the world are valid. It's a woke right premise they want you to accept, and Epstein's just the bait. So I'm not a woke right person. I'm not a woke left person. Psy Girl says, were these federal convictions fake? Was 9/11 fake? Was Sandy Hook fake? Was the events of were the events of 2020 fake? I mean, when you get down to it, why would you say the Epstein thing was real but everything else was fake? And if the Epstein thing is real, was Butler, Pennsylvania fake? Was January 6th fake? Because if those two, if the January 6th or the Butler events were fake, if 2020 was fake, and Epstein was real, and Trump, I'm sorry here, but there's a point here where it becomes contradictory. Because Trump is either complicit in the whole thing or he's not. And right now with the cover-up, it makes him look complicit to the woke right, interestingly enough, like he's part of it. And didn't Musk kind of drop that hint as well? Elon Musk was like, Trump's in the Epstein files. I'm just saying that you've all been misled if you believe it. Like, was there a client list? And I remember all these fake lists going around. That's why I bring up Stephen Hawking's. But no, what I'm saying here is this. I'm rejecting all of it on the premise that if any part of it's fake, it's all got to be fake. It's like the people, the bitter clingers, the bitter death clingers. The death clingers are the people who would say, somebody died at 9/11. I'm like, okay, well, if the towers were brought down in a controlled demo, surrounded by NRO drills, if there were all kinds of mass casualty operations going on at the time, then presumably they were empty. And if the planes weren't real, but they were CGI inserts, video composite overlays, then you can subtract those deaths. And there would still some people say, well, no, some people had to have died. There had to have been jumpers. I'm like, I don't know. That whole argument loses any kind of momentum the instant you show any part of it's fake. So we shouldn't be saying, okay, well, at first it was 3,000, but maybe only 2,000 died. No, the instant you discredit any part of the story, the body count goes to 0. And so until you find the Epstein story to me has no truth to it. So Psy Girl, who's kind of woke right, says there was no federal conviction of Epstein or Maxwell because the whole narrative was fake. Yeah, I'm saying the whole thing was likely an engineered psyop to create the woke right. That's what I'm telling you. The purpose of the psyop, the purpose of the Epstein psyop is to sell a bunch of people on the right blood libel, to sell them Pizzagate. Well, nobody's buying blood libel anymore. It's the 21st. That's like medieval stuff. You know, this group is the drinking the blood from babies and stuff. So then they bring in Pizzagate. Well, that only works with Christians who fall for satanic panics, and it's easy to dismiss. So Pizzagate isn't really a thing anymore. I don't see anybody hyping Pizzagate. Why are you hyping Epstein and you're not hyping Pizzagate? How come you're not talking about Hillary Clinton sacrificing babies to Moloch? So the Epstein story is just as fake as these other stories. And the point of it is to get you mad at Israel and to get you woke right and to get you to buy into the right side of the political horseshoe. And I'm not there. Look, I'm not in your political horseshoe. And you're not saving any children. Nobody from the Q movement saved a single child. No Wayfair children were saved. It's all imagination. It's an alternate reality game. Beheaded One says, all these court cases are not real. This is why everybody is talking about Amber Heard. They were there to validate and push legitimacy to the more impactful ones like Alex Jones. Look, Alex Jones had his debt overturned. That judgment. He's not paying Sandy Hookers anything. And that was fake. So the fact is, do you think they can fake entire events? Yes. Can they fake it in the court system? Yes. This is the big conspiracy that you're missing. If you miss the forest for the trees, here's what you miss. If you think the fakery is not a big deal, here's what you're missing. Every staged event, whether it be a mass shooting, a terror attack, or the Epstein thing, these things all require collusion between DHS, between the media, fire departments, police departments, hospitals, morgues, coroners, and the legal system, the courts. So you're missing the big picture. You realize that a Sandy Hook would not be possible, that Butler would not have been possible if both wings of the media weren't collaborating at the top. Democrat media, Republican media work together and always have. They don't contradict each other for this reason on the fakery. And January 6th, fake. Do you think any of those trials were real? Do you think real people got arrested? Fake. Girl is being sarcastic and says, if the courts serve you with the summons, ignore it because the courts and trials are fake. Okay, here's what you're missing. I'm not saying everything is fake. I'm saying the fake things are fake. The real stuff is real. If you can't tell the difference, you're mind controlled. If you're confused. You're confused if that's your takeaway. If you think that I'm saying that nothing's real, you've gone schizo and they won. I think what the issue here is, look, if all you can throw at me are these barbs of, I'm not calling everything fake. You're throwing a straw man argument at me. I steel man the arguments of the people I disagree with. If I don't agree with somebody, I find the best arguments in favor of their side, and I aim at discrediting that. And if all you can do is throw these weak little straw man barbs like, oh, you're saying everything's fake, well, then you're not paying attention. And if you're not paying attention, you're wasting your time. And you're triggered. If you're triggered, then you're programmed. You're like an MK Ultra robot where Big Brother can put a headline and now you're in a tizzy. Well, Big Brother can't get to me like that. Big Brother's not under my skin. I'm not triggered. My world's not being shaken up because of a freaking headline. And again, I want to remind you, you're not a hero. You haven't saved any children. You haven't exposed any deep state because there is no such thing. At best, you're a propaganda mule weighed down with a bunch of red pills on your back. At worst, you're a provocateur agent fed, being paid to try to keep the skeptics from arriving at the correct conclusions. And at this point, I'm leaning towards you're a woke right propaganda mule. And that's fine. You can carry water for Big Brother if you want to. You know, I look at the chemtrail people who are unable to enjoy a picnic because they're terrified of clouds. I'm like, what a price to pay. What a burden to carry. And you're paying for your own picnic. I mean, you're paying for your own programming. Like if I was, to be completely honest here, at this point in 2025, I'm going to say this. If you're still carrying red pills, you're either a propaganda mule dupe or you're an agent. It's one of the two. And I happen to respect agents more because agents are being paid. But the fact is, if they can fake a 9/11, then you're not. Then they can fake a simple psyop involving a trial. They can convict somebody of something. It's all just paperwork. But you have to look at this. These hoaxes aren't from the bottom up. The word hoax minimizes what we're talking about. The hoax sounds local. No, we're talking about top-down psychological operations. Girl says human trafficking is not real. It's a fake media narrative. Again, you're just illustrating that you don't have a clue. Nobody's saying human trafficking is not real. We're saying your human trafficking is not real. Your Epstein fetish is fake. You want to talk about real human trafficking? Why don't you care about the child brides? None of the people talking about Epstein and the Democrats abusing children care about 8-year-olds or 5-year-olds getting married in parts of the world. No, they don't talk about real oppression or trafficking. Stuff that's documented that you can actually find information about. Yeah, I think Girl is triggered because she's woke right and she's mad that we're taking out her fantasy. Look, I can't help you, but if all you're going to do here is be dishonest and try to say that we're calling everything fake, then I don't know what to tell you other than stay triggered. If you need to stay triggered to feel like you're accomplishing something, go for it. You know, it's like Greta, how dare you? You can get triggered over fake issues and feel self-righteous. No, Girl's not trolling. Girl is weighed down with many sacks full of red pills on her back, and she's carrying this burden, and we're not taking the red pills. We're not lifting the burden. We're not sharing it. We're not taking the bait. And that's all low-hanging fruit anyway. You have zero evidence for this stuff. This isn't defeatism, Girl, because you're not winning. You're not fighting. In fact, you've already been defeated. If you're taking the red pills, you've been defeated. You think the blue pills are the only people who take the blue pill? You can point at them and say, okay, they've been defeated. The propaganda war won. They believe everything. Well, guess what? The red pill is just a blue pill with candy coating to make it a little more exciting, to make it seem like you're doing something. But it's a deeper level of programming. So you've been programmed even deeper. Girl says, don't waste time fighting for the truth because all you need to say is it's fake. No, here's what I'm saying you're wrong. Here's where you're wrong, Girl. You're not fighting for truth. You're fighting for the other side. You're controlled opposition. If you're pushing red pills, you are the controlled op. If you're pushing the Epstein narrative is real, you're the controlled opposition. If you're spreading these fear narratives like chemtrails, you're a controlled op. So I'm thinking back, you're anti-vax, you're controlled opposition. The pro and the anti positions are identical. They're both wrong. That's why I'm anti-anti. So what I'm pointing out here is that there's a psychological warfare going on. There's a worldview, which is a consensus agreed upon version of things built upon our fake history that everybody is in. That's the big program, and you're defending it. What's up, Mike D? No, I don't have a vehicle good enough for DoorDash. This vehicle's on its last leg. And so that's not going to happen. I considered it at a time though, but I do junk hauling. So people hit me up with, old couches and mattresses and stuff, and I haul stuff to the dump. Right now I'm emptying out my office. But yeah, let me be clear on this. Red pill ideology is controlled opposition. So yeah, I got side railed by a troll here who thinks that straw man arguments are somehow valid. Nobody is saying everything is fake. That is so dishonest to even suggest that we would be saying that. Like, we made this distinction a long time ago between informed disbelief and low information disbelief. And if you're trying to categorize us with low info disbelief, then you're just spreading misinformation. But we can do without this hysterical overreactions from the wokes. Red pill wokeism is a mind virus. Till says, I think Cygirl is confusing staged for fake. No, I think Cygirl is attached to the red pill ideology because of sunk costs. You invest years into years of emotion into this particular story, these bad guys, these victims, and then we say, well, no, actually, there were no bad guys and there were no victims. Well, what happens to that? It's ego, it's pride, it's sunken costs. But you know who the victim is? The victim is the conspiracy theorist. So yeah, they're running a controlled opposition talking point, but they are the victims. If you're spreading, let's say you're spreading Gretaism and you're terrified of the weather. Okay, you're a victim. If you lay in the street to stop cars because of the climate, you're a victim. We can all agree, right? The red pill community are victims. If you're scared of clouds, you're a victim. If you fell for these lies that warped your worldview, you're a mind war casualty. If you believe in nukes, you're a victim. If you believe in Vaxageddon, you're a victim of mind war. So Cygirl is a mind war casualty, as is every other red pill dispenser. And there's plenty of time. There has been a lot of time to debunk all this stuff, and there still is some time. You don't have to fall for everything. You don't have to spend the rest of your life chasing carrots and red herrings. Dangling carrots, like the whole Epstein list, or chasing after red herrings and fake scapegoats. Those are all, that's the meta conspiracy. And I'm the only person saying this. Like, if you want to be around people that agree with you, every single other red pill friendly channel agrees with you on everything. I am the only person on the internet that will tell you that chemtrails are fake. I really am. Think about the significance of that. I'm the only person. No one out there, no one else is saying chemtrails are fake, except for the people who believe in climate change and fall into the other side of the spectrum. Like, I'm the only person who's not programmed into left-wing orthodoxies that will tell you chemtrails are fake. It's all about the political horseshoe. And the reason why I harp on certain issues like anti-geoengineering is that these are foundational. These are foundational to the woke premise of that side. Like, if you accept the premise that CO2 is toxic and will kill everybody on the earth, well, that informs your worldview. We need to change everything. Everybody needs to change. There needs to be a revolutionary change so that we don't destroy the world with this. The anti-geoengineering premise establishes quite a lot. Not just that we're all going to die, that we're all under threat, but it also establishes the they. And when you dig into it, well, who is the they? Well, according to the side of the political horseshoe that believes in anti-geoengineering, the they is Israel. And it always points there because it is all just repackaged blood libel. Lord Laney says she wants to load her muskets and ride. I can get all riled up sometimes too, but I stop and think, is it a psyop? The answer is always yes. Well, that's another thing too. No, none of them have ever done anything. None of these red pill people have done anything. The ultimate culmination of it was what? January 6th, which was a psyop anyway. But there's been no revolution. There's been no significant or meaningful activism. They just become propagandists for what they think is the truth. And the truth is not going to be found in red pills. And it's not going to be found in the mainstream. It's going to be found on the off-world stage perspective. And the truth is hard for some people to accept because the truth is, you know, is it good? It's kind of hard to say. Oh, okay, I could say this. It's a good thing that nobody died at any of these mass shootings. It's a good thing that the terror attacks were all staged. Can we agree that's a good thing? Apparently not. It's a good thing that Wayfair was fake and children are not being trafficked in filing cabinets and furniture packages. It's a good thing Tim Ballard was a con artist and the trafficking through these shipping crates is fake. Like, these are good things. But they're bad if you're invested in red pills because it's your cause. You're trying to save the children. You're trying to stop Bill Gates. If you find out this stuff is fake, that the victims are fake, well, you're no longer a hero. It's a good thing children are not being trafficked underground in tunnels and harvested in satanic rituals for their adrenochrome. That's actually a good thing. But you tell that to somebody who spent the last 10 years trying to save the children from the adrenochrome vampires, and guess what? They will basically tell you that you're wrong for calling it fake, that you're a defeatist. Oh, you're a defeatist, and you just think there's no such thing as human trafficking. No, I don't think that there are vampires sucking adrenochrome out of the pineal glands of kindergartners in pizza parlors. There's a difference. There's a big difference between agitprop and the real stuff. And the people who are all mad about the agitprop don't care about the real stuff. Like, there are people, look at the millions, I don't know, all the people who are part of the red pill movement who thought that there were children being trafficked. None of them spent time trying to look after legitimate cases of human rights abuses. None of them advocate for the ending of oppression of children in other parts of the world. No, they're only focused on the ones that the Democrats are accused of abusing. That's the thing. The red pill movement, the red pills were dropped like breadcrumbs. They led you on a trail. And where do they lead you? Into the political horseshoe, to the voting booth. They turned you into a voter. Not only that, but they turned you into a voter with the far-right ideology, totally programmed, that keeps you firmly ensconced within the world stage deceptions. And what's really contradictory about this is that if you're going to be a part of that, you're part of you're a part of the worldview in which nukes are real. Like, to me, it's like you can't have 1 foot in the fake matrix of the fake propaganda matrix and 1 foot off-world stage. Mike D says, I have a loved one in my life wished harm upon me because I didn't believe. Well, it's just like any other religion. As far as I'm concerned, mainstream media is a religion, and these are myths. Okay, the UFO thing, myth. This is what I brought. I was bringing that up for a reason. And Kubrick and Eyes Wide Shut. Okay, so think about this. If Stanley Kubrick was part of the NASA PSYOP, with Apollo 11 in particular, and he dropped hints about it in The Shining, which is where a lot of people get this from, as he seemed to do in all his movies, kind of a signature. But if he was hinting at something in his movies that turned out to be fake, then why would we think that his Eyes Wide Shut would be hinting at something real? See, he could be he's evidently part of, as a metascriptor, Kubrick's work is part of this body of work that adds what I call reinforcement content to the fake news events. Lord Laney says, even though I take a skeptical stance when I hear the Wayfair song, I can't help but think of trafficking, real or not. What if the point of was to Pavlovian entertain us with association with sound and hypnosis? David Polk says, there is no far right in the American politics, only far left. Far right means fighting back. Cute slogan, but that's not true. There's a schism in the right that has been explicitly defined recently by its own advocates outing themselves. And I put out a book in May called The Woke Right because it was getting so annoying that nobody was using this phrase to describe it. But I talked about this a year ago. I called it red pill wokeism. I said, hey, notice how the red pill people have become a mirror of the woke left. Well, now woke right is being talked about, and it makes sense now when you recognize that the woke right is built upon the premise of Jewish control, the J pill. That's why Epstein is so important to them. The Epstein story implicates Israel. It validates their J pill worldview. Well, the red pill movement is a subset of the J pill. It's a repackaging to mainstream it. Alex Jones has been selling this for years. When Alex Jones says globalists, he means Israel. When Alex Jones says George Soros, he means the Jews. Alex Jones has been selling J-pill light for many years. And he knows it. It's all just cleverly repackaged propaganda designed to sell it to a mass audience without being called out on it for ethnic hate, etc. But that is ultimately what he is about. And so there is a far right. The far right is the part that's not pro-Israel. So you got neocon, woke right, pro-Israel, anti-Israel. It's pretty split down the middle. And so the word far is vague, woke is specific, because wokeism is about a worldview shift that happens when a person comes to the realization that everything can be explained when I've taken this pill, when I've looked through this particular frame. Whether it's the frame of Jews control everything, whites control everything, reptilians control everything. Once you've accepted a premise like that, there's a whole set of conspiracy narratives ready for you, rabbit trails that they've already well-paved rabbit trails that you can walk down. And you think you're gaining enlightenment. No, you're being led by feds into a deeper level of control to where now you think you're fighting a cause. And you think you're fighting a cause and the non-believers threaten you. So you get Psy Girl come in here who thinks that she's fighting a cause and I am the resistance. No, you are the controlled opposition. And the only resistance to the controlled opposition is are the conscientious objectors and the skeptics. And you're not going to find skeptics in Trutherville. You're not going to find skeptics within the political horseshoe because their skepticism is only limited to the other faction. They trust their own side implicitly. So we are the uncontrolled opposition. The only opposition to the world stage is off-world stage. And if you can't let go of the atrocity propaganda narratives, then you're a mind control casualty. They've got you. And I consider chemtrail believers, Epstein believers, and anybody woke right to be casualties of the mind war. And look, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're a good person. They tapped into your empathy, but they jacked it into a false narrative. Like, hey, you're a good person. You should want to save the world. Here's how to do it. Like, you don't think the missionaries think they're good people? You know, missionaries, like those you see these guys on bicycles driving around selling their Mormon cult, or Scientologists at the fair in their booth offering a, quote, free stress test. Yeah, they all think they're doing very good because they've been convinced we've got to save the world. You know, I was in Scientology for a little while. Not a Scientologist, but I was investigating it. And what I learned was they're told the world is contaminated and in need of a cleansing. And they're willing to throw away their families because their families are part of the problem because their families don't believe them. Their families think engrams are fake, so they're suppressive. So they only stick around their own kind, other believers. And it creates this echo chamber. So they think they're on a righteous crusade to save the world, but they're totally deceived. The same is true of the red pill people. You think you're saving the world? No, you're deceived. And what's worse, you're working for the enemy. You're working for Scientology, you're working for Mormonism, you're working for the opposition to the truth. You're working for the red pill distribution agencies, the feds, pretending to be conspiracy theorists. You're controlled opposition. And what I'm promoting here is a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm shift to exit Trutherville. And if you're not willing to exit Trutherville, you know, you can stay there. I would say walk down Q Street and really think about where you are. Pass through Alex Jonestown. Don't take the Kool-Aid. Look at all the mind war casualties around you. Look what they believe. Look at their confused state and how they don't know that they're all tools, useful stooges for the Republican Party. You realize that if you think you're fighting the deep state and you're a red pill addict and you're fighting Epstein, you realize that you're just an appendage of the GOP. You're part of their base. That's not freedom. That's not truth. That's not an awakening. That's mind war. That's a mind war casualty. A person who's bought all this stuff. So again, it's a paradigm shift to walk away from it. And look, I'm not going to apologize, but I can empathize with your disappointment that none of those kids died at Sandy Hook. I empathize with your disappointment that nobody died on 9/11. And I get it, you're disappointed that billions didn't die from the vax. And I get it, you're very disappointed that a bunch of children didn't get trafficked for their adrenochrome. I know how much emotion you invested into these false narratives, but none of those victims are real. And I hope you can cope with that. Like, why do I feel like the good news is bad news to these people? They treat it like it's bad news. I'm like, here's the good news. All those trafficked children you're trying to save, they don't exist. And instead of celebrating and saying, thank God, I was so worried about those children, I'm so glad that it was a hoax. No, instead, they look at you like, oh, you must be one of the human traffickers. DeWitt's Les says, besides, if the white hats are saving the world in secret, why do they have to tell us about it all the time? You know what? I was in communication with a couple of individuals that I believe were feds. This was back in the summer of 2017, right before Q did his first Q drop. This is very telling, because before the first Q drop, I was approached by this individual and his friends, Ed, Upside Down Head, Cathexis, and others, and they said to me, you don't need a YouTube channel. You shouldn't be talking about these conspiracies. I know you're very, they told me I was brave. It's very courageous of you to talk about this, but you know, the white hats are gonna wake everybody up. You don't have to do this. You can just sit back and eat the popcorn. Before Q, there were people talking about white hats. Before Q, they were talking about just sit back and eat the popcorn and don't get involved. I was dealing with this attempt to coerce me out of a YouTube channel dedicated to looking at these conspiracies. Anyway, this was before Q came out, and he said the white hats are behind the scenes. And here's what Cathexis said to me. He said, you know, you talk about these conspiracies, and it sounds very negative, you know, conspiracy. Why don't we call it a prospiracy? And the prospiracy is that the white hats are secretly working behind the scenes to save us, and Trump knows. Now, I bring this up because this person was a major influence, because he was always in the voice chats with me in Discord. And this is why I'm hesitant to blow up Discord again. I can get the Discord channel rolling, but I got to make sure I don't have any influence agents in there. Because what this person did was, they latched into the room. We would have these conversations about media fakery, and then Q happens. And shortly after, actually, Q drop happens on October the 5th, 2017. That was 4 days after Vegas. When Vegas happened, I lost my channel for calling it a hoax. And we had a lot of reasons for saying so. Well, when Q happened, all the Q people who believed it said, well, no, wait, that was a deep state attack to make Donald Trump look bad. So now Cathexis comes along and he's saying, my heart goes out to the victims of Vegas. And I'm like, wait a minute here. Why are you sending your heart out to people who may not exist? Let's go with fake until proven real. And that created a schism. And he says, and you know what? This stuff is real. Others said to me that that they're trying to manifest and create a great awakening, and I was gonna bring it down. So they left, and with them half the server. So we had half of our Discord server leave because we were calling things fake, and it contradicted their Q fantasy about Trump fighting the deep state. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. This whole Q movement just took a lot of skeptics, budding auto-hoaxers, and turned them into Trump voters overnight. I watched it happen. I watched the red pill movement get co-opted into MAGA. Just like that, because of Vegas. And we were making a lot of progress. And that's when the censorship clamped down. That's when they no longer allowed people calling stuff fake to trend on YouTube. They really pushed back after Vegas. And I'm saying that all these red pill dupes fell for it. And here we are 8 years later, and they're still hooked on the same supply. Red pill junkies. The beheaded one says Discord is a massive tool used by feds alike to... Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Discord... And he says here, yeah, you can't just casually play games without some ex-military people pushing psyops 24/7. Yeah, okay, so the guy Ed Upside Down Head that I referenced, who was friends with cathexis, was in the military. I think he was military intelligence. And he was the one who told me about white hats before the Q movement. And these two individuals were communicating with me offline a lot, and they were trying very hard to influence me. But they always do it. And there was actually this article that came out that revealed that the feds had hired 10,000 some contractors to spend their time on Discord spreading the It's the Jews conspiracies. You know, one of our Discord servers, the one that had 500 plus people in it, was shut down by this person who I think was an agent. His name was Exalt. And he would go in there and spread racist stuff against blacks, Jews, Indians, and then sexist stuff. He'd post pictures of women from Tinder who were too fat for him. Like he would consistently be in there like shit posting stuff that had nothing to do with us. And we would get flagged and anyway, my point of it was we were sabotaged by somebody whose only purpose, it seemed, was to make it look like the server was involved in that type of propaganda. Well, anyway, this person posted, once he posted a picture of himself, and he was like this, like this Aryan Nazi type, right? Well, later on a live stream, he accidentally showed himself, and that wasn't him. He was some scrawny little Charles Manson looking guy. And not only was he not this white nationalist, champion of the country of Canada, whatever, fighting against immigrants, but he was in fact, and I don't know, I don't want to say too much, but I found out where he was actually staying, and I'm pretty sure he was an agent, is what I'm saying. Like putting on a false persona, and he was spreading propaganda. But here's what was interesting about it. Everything that he spread, every meme, was lockstep with what the major influencers were spreading. And this is uniform. Across Telegram and Discord, you've got agents who are spreading stuff that's coming from the same source. Like we used to call it the current thing. Like, why is it right now everybody's talking about Wayfair? Or now everyone's talking about space lasers. Everyone's talking about fill in the blank. But it was like uniform. You know how we often look at how the mainstream media is uniform and all the reporters say the same things in the same day? They created the same effect in alternative media. Alt media is 100% an echo chamber. But instead of one big echo chamber, it's hundreds of thousands of echo chambers that are all echoing the same messaging at the same time. What's up, Ted Stryker? Lord Laney says, I bet Discord's made to train feds, help them establish a foothold in the zeitgeist and direct public thinking, as well as train the feds to interact with, learn the lingo, people peeking behind the curtain. Yeah, exactly. And I witnessed this firsthand. I witnessed this phenomenon of narratives being promulgated. Okay, here's another example. One day I noticed all of a sudden a bunch of these right-wing types are like humble bragging about going to the gym. Like, don't you guys hate it when you're at the gym and you just finished doing a heavy bench press load and you see some woman dressed immodestly, too revealing? And I'm like, I'm thinking, I've never seen that. But when I go to the gym, I'm not really looking around. But then I see Ben Shapiro. I'm so tired of these women at the gym who are just dressed like they're posing for Instagram. And then Steven Crowder, these women at the gym. And then I see all these anonymous Twitter accounts, like, women at the gym today. There should be segregated gyms for men and women because the women are just dressing and it's just distracting for me. And then I see the same rhetoric in the Discord servers. And I'm like, okay, what is with all these right-wing types all of a sudden complaining about yoga pants all at the same time? Well, this was at the same time that Matt Walsh, Owen Benjamin, and like 50 other right-wing types I could name started complaining about the age of consent. I'm like, wait, why are they all complaining about the age of consent? Well, this is a common thread among the anti-feminists who say that feminism got women to hold back on having children until after they've gone through college and been brainwashed by the left into hating men, and now they're feminists, etc. So all the right-wing types who have been branded toxic masculinity, the Andrew Tate type, they're all about the age of consent is a form of the leftists taking control of the women they should control. But they all said it at the same time. I'm like, why is Matt Walsh pulled over at the side of the road, mad? I mean, this guy's married with children, and he's mad that we're not. And then Owen Benjamin's like, well, my great-great-grandfather, had kids. They were married at 12 or something. And I'm like, wait a minute here. What is the pattern? The pattern was the far right was being inundated with what I call MAGA band values, where it was like, all of a sudden, Make America Great Again actually points to this. Traditional values over progressive values, where they were bringing up these talking points all at the same time to build resentment against Western women, against women not covering their hair. Like, I've even seen, okay, and this is not new. There was that book called Cruel Hoax, Feminism and the New World Order by Henry Maycow. And Henry Maycow once wrote this article juxtaposing the bikini and the burqa. And he argued that the bikini was oppressive and that the burqa was liberating. And I'm like, okay, the far right has embraced the values of radical Islam, or at least the Taliban, the MAGA band values. And this is when I started to see, okay, the glorification of the incel. So you might laugh at the incels, the involuntarily celibate, who become mass shooters, like the incel that shot up the sorority, Eugene Rogers. You have these various incels, these male shooters, and they're canonized. They're turned into saints on 4chan. So why is that? It's like the suicide bomber. What is the suicide bomber? The suicide bomber is fighting against the corrupt values of the West. So they sacrifice themselves. They're sexually repressed terrorists who want their virgins in heaven. The incel, a sexually repressed terrorist who gets canonized by his followers for fighting against the West. Only they call it the deep state. The great Satan, the deep state, it's the same thing. And both of these refer to Western values corrupted by Israel, corrupted by Jews. It all points to the same essential foundational conspiracy theory, the same wokeism. But I watched this happen. I watched the conspiracy theorists given red pills, brought into the manosphere, and then pushed into MAGA band values, pushed into these traditional versus progressive dialectic. And it goes all the way down the line. This is why the Satanic Panic Pizzagate works so well on the far right, because it feeds into all of their biases. So what we're really talking about here presently with the Discord thing is how they use Discord to influence the very culture of conspiracy theorist consumers. And it brought them from, I'm interested in Bigfoot and aliens, to Epstein's going to show that Jews control everything and we can unravel the deep state and have a great awakening. They were brought into this. The red pills were breadcrumbs, and it led them to a very predictable end. But you look at the values of this. There's a reason why these conspiracy theories are popularized by certain influencers, like a Joe Rogan or MMA. Why do you have MMA fighters pushing conspiracy theories? It's because this is part of the structure. They want the conspiracy theories to be associated with what the left calls toxic masculinity. They invented the MAGA ban and MAGA ban values, which boils down to Christian nationalism, which is all where it all heads, America first. So I'm just pointing out here that the whole conspiracy theory culture got co-opted since 2017 through Discord, because it wasn't a culture. You realize, like, before 2017, or before Q, conspiracy theorists weren't part of some big club. Like, you had various pockets of discussion, but it had not been consolidated. You had various groups of people talking about things all the time. There've always been, ufology clubs and conferences. But with the advent of Q, all the conspiracies got consolidated, and it was a great marketing ploy. Like, oh, hey guys, your conspiracies are all true, and if you vote for Trump, he will solve them all. He'll put a stop to it. So they consolidated as a voting block all the various conspiracy theorists, and then they gradually shifted their culture into essentially a political religion. Woke right. And when I say Psy Girl's woke right, I'm not trying to be, it's not a pejorative. It's an accurate definition of this person's ideology. Woke right refers to being on this side of the political horseshoe, and your central premise being, I'm oppressed by Israel, and there's a white genocide happening, and Epstein's the key to exposing their control over our government, and 9/11 was them, and JFK was them. David says, I've had black fatigue. Oh, that's another one of these memes. David Polk is against yoga pants and black people. See, what are you even doing here if you're caught up in this stuff? Like, what are you doing here if you're caught up in racialism? Like, shouldn't you be making white babies? Like, what are you even doing here, being an incel? And you're hanging out at a Discord server that is not only not in the political horseshoe, but we're not activists for anything. And I openly say, I don't believe in white genocide. I don't believe in any of your xenophobic fairy tales. So if that's where you're at, what are you doing here? Like, you're not going to change our minds. And shouldn't you be fighting for your homeland, for your people? And if you hate blacks, I mean, I don't understand you. And I understand, I do understand you. You're a mind war casualty. But what I tell people is, like, the only thing you really have in life is your attention. You're not going to change my mind, because my opinions here are based on reason. And so you're not going to change my mind with your weak propaganda, with your shitty straw man arguments. You're not going to guilt trip me about saving the children that don't exist. And I'm taking this perspective here that if you're not looking at the big picture, you're not going to be able to put anything else into context. Like, there are people who are total blue pill who know that Trump faked his head wound, but they can't contextualize it, so they don't arrive at the right conclusions because they're still attached to every other narrative. No, I'm not trying to change your mind, David Polk. I mean, if you're a racist, you were made that way. And you were made that way by propaganda, you have to admit. Nothing happened to you in real life because your real life experience would contradict the racist narratives. And I follow these narratives closely. I follow all the people promulgating this stuff. And like Nick Fuentes talking about IQ. David Polk says, hate is a label to silence politically incorrect views. Check interracial crime statistics. There you go. I knew you were going to cite that. Yeah, you're going to cite, 13% are responsible for this. Yeah, I've heard all this stuff for years, and you haven't read those studies. And I don't think you have a full enough context to make any of these points. And something else I noticed too. I noticed a lot of these people who are pushing for guilt, like Jews killed Jesus. Like, look, to be quite honest, I don't believe in, if this offends you, I truly don't care. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe in a lot of things. But they will say Jews are guilty for what Jews did in the past. So they hold every one of them guilty, collective guilt. So then I say, okay, well then you're guilty for slavery and Jim Crow. You're guilty for everything whites have done. They're like, no, white guilt is a liberal thing. Okay, so you're not guilty for what your ancestors did, but you're holding the other guys guilty for what they did. Programmed. David Polk is programmed. And the only reason he's here, and I don't like the expression, but if you can imagine this is a punch bowl, he's here to destroy the punch bowl for everybody. Just like Exalt did for our Discord server. A number of these people, these walking you-know-whats, are simply there to contaminate the pool. David Polk is a POS. In his own admission. Like, oh, I'm small-minded. I think in stereotypes. I let agitprop turn me into a hateful bigot. Like, good for you. You've become a loser. By all definitions, you're unintelligent. Because to be a racist is to think in stereotypes. A stereotype, by definition, is less information, aka less intelligence. There's 2 million people here, And there's 3 different categories. So now I'm going to think of them in 3 different ways, like they're 3 different people. No, I'm sorry, but you're effacing individuals in these groups, variations, divergence, diversity. Not Me says it's not race, it's the culture. In certain communities, you can't associate crime to race. Yeah, there's a really good book on mob psychology I was looking into. And one of the things I noticed is that a lot of the great studies on mobs, mob violence, were studies on Europeans, on whites. We're talking about like poor people rising up and destroying marketplaces, mobbing, burning down villages, etc. So a lot of this research on mob psychology comes from whites. And then you see videos online of black youth raiding convenience stores. And people say it's because they're race. I'm like, no, because this type of activity is ubiquitous and always has been. And it's specifically tied to socioeconomic factors. But you have others who will, you have this refrain like David Polk was saying, like, well, what about these murder statistics? No, actually, if you look at it, you have to look at the broader context first of all. But most of the killings are intra-race. And yeah, there are other factors. Like I live in a city this is the 9th most violent city in the country, I think I've heard. And I have cousins who won't come here because I think it's so dangerous. And it's like, well, no, really, the violence is limited to gangbangers, to people in certain trades, certain fields of endeavor where you would expect that to happen. But the common denominator is poverty, drugs, and crime. But again, this is actually a pretty decent book. It's by Thomas Sowell. I think it's called Black Rednecks, White Liberals. And he gets into some stuff about the IQ stuff. So Nick Fuentes was on Candace Owens talking about IQ. And if you go through that, Thomas Sowell talks about IQ tests and how a lot of the rhetoric about IQ tests is a misunderstanding about how these tests work. But if you get away from the stuff that would specifically advantage those born in certain cultures, exposed to certain ideas, raised in certain communities, who've gone to certain schools, they're going to test higher than those who haven't. But in areas of like spatial reasoning, for example, you're not going to see disparities among, quote, races. So the people who cite IQ are just propagandists. The Beheaded one says gangs and police work together through Freemasonry. Yeah, I think so. In fact, one Mason told me, this is back when I was in it, he said that we are the biggest gang. And I think at the time he said 5 million members. And I think there's something to it. I think there's something to gang initiations. And, I think I've done a little bit of research into it, but there's some things where you can look at, there's a relationship. They're controlled. Polk always referencing statistics like a good believer. Well, that specific statistic he's referencing is a dog whistle. We'll say, 13%. 13% of the population are responsible for 50% of this. That is not a valid statistic. It's a talking point. It's rhetoric at this point. And the first time I heard that, God, they've been citing that for decades. And what it doesn't account for are a lot of things. For one, that is a statistic that assumes that these convictions are all legitimate, that there's no police corruption. Let's say there's no police corruption, there's no quotas. Let's say there's no racism in the police. Let's say that there's no bias whatsoever, and that everything is completely fair and honest. Then the statistics might mean something. But you have to look at where these came from, and then the history here in this country. It's pretty dark. And I'm not a woke leftist. I'm not saying I believe in systemic racism or any of that stuff necessarily. But you can find, and a lot of it's anecdotal, but a lot of it's you can find good documentation. You can find examples of wrongful convictions, lots of them. So how much do you trust the statistics? Look into the Innocence Project. How many people are convicted because of the way the interrogation happened influenced the person's answers? David Polk says, go hang out in a black... What are you doing here, David? Why don't you go hang out with an all-white commune and have a bunch of babies? Go inbreed, if that's what you're into. Isn't that what you're about? Like, what are you doing here? Why do we have an advocate for, white nationalism in a non-political discussion group focused on media fakery? This is more philosophical than anything. So I have to wonder, so David Polk is an anonymous person. There's no way he's got a real identity attached to any of this stuff. Go back to X. People just go on X and they sit around all day hating on black people. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with you? And a lot of them are just blatantly targeted. You know, they're being, like, I've seen it. The algorithm, they are targeting people with this stuff. You know, leading up to Jordan Neely getting strangled on the subway, which was applauded by the right wing, leading up to it, Twitter was like 90% videos of violent subway attacks. No, David Polk, you're trying to look virtuous here. You're virtue signaling. You're virtue signaling your purity and whatever it is. Like, we get it. You're super pure. You're Aryan race or whatever. You're a Christian nationalist, whatever. Good for you. How many babies have you made? What have you done to stop the white genocide? My tribe, my race. Gotta save my race. You're not gonna save your race over here. Dr. Backasword says, how would they attempt to co-opt the off-world stage? You know, I've thought about this long and hard, and you know what? They can't. They can't co-opt this because everything we talk about undermines their central premise. So, for example, if you wanted to push woke rightism here, we've already undermined that. You can't come to the off-world stage if you believe in chemtrails. There's no chemtrails off-world stage. And that's going to hold a lot of people back. That's one of the reasons why I harped on anti-geoengineering, is that you got to take the foundational orthodoxies that guardrail people and prevent them from leaving the world stage. You can't come to the off-world stage if you believe in a simulation causing predictive programming. You can't come to the off-world stage if you believe that you're a video game character and nothing is real. If you're Mandela affected, sorry, you can't come here. If you are a race warrior fighting white genocide, you're not going to have a foothold here. You wouldn't be buoyant. You see, the sea of irrelevance is how we describe this. The Aldous Huxley described it as the sea of irrelevance. There's so much information that the truth gets drowned. The IPS is a raft. You know, penguins on the water, they gang up and it creates a raft. This is a raft. We are buoyant. We're on top of the sea of irrelevance. We're not in it. Anybody who's still carrying any of these conspiracy narratives, anybody who's carrying saddlebags full of red pills, let's say you're a propaganda mule and you want to float out here in the raft. Well, you might be able to as a mule, as a propaganda mule, but if you're weighed down by a bunch of these red pills, you're going to be submerged. You're going to sink. You won't be buoyant. Clump says Huxley knew to breed selectively. Yeah, this obsession with like blood purity is a psyop, and it's not a coincidence that you're talking about breeding selectively. You're a blood purity person, right? Like David Polk, where you're pro inbreeding. So you're a blood purity guy. You're also anti-vax. I can guarantee it. You're anti-vax because you don't want your blood contaminated. You're anti-immigrant because you don't want your DNA contaminated. Blood purity is a big psyop here. And there's a reason why the racists are anti-vax. And look, I'm not pro-vax. I'm like non-participating. I'm a non-vax. But I see the pro-anti as a controlled dialectic. But the same people who are marketed and targeted with propaganda to make them anti-vax are targeted with anti-immigration stuff. And they're told it has the same cause. And they're also told, I mean, this is all overlapping stuff. I'm surprised we have these brainwashies in here. Clump says that's Huxley's idea. No, selective breeding is not Huxley's idea. It's the woman's idea. Whoever picks who she's going to have a husband with, a baby with. It's already selective. You think they're just randomly having... No, people make their choices. You have courtship rituals. People are making their own decisions. You think people aren't deciding who they want to have kids with? Oh, when you said selective breeding, because there are people who are online, they're just obsessed with blood purity. They're obsessed with their race. It's kind of funny when the depopulate... Remember, like, one of the current things of the day that no one cares about anymore was depopulation. Remember the Georgia Guidestones? They're going to kill us all. They're going to depopulate us. So I remember this period of time, a couple of weeks, where the truthers were all saying, I haven't seen any pregnant women. Nobody's having kids anymore. How many of you heard that? There were people who were convinced that the vaccine sterilized everybody. Nobody's having kids anymore. There's no kids. Nobody wants to have kids. Why aren't anybody having kids? They have these talking points they run with, like nobody's having kids anymore. And so I'm like, okay, you guys are worried about depopulation, nobody's having kids, and then you're complaining about immigration. I'm like, wait a minute, there's a bunch of immigrants coming here, and then you saying that we're running out of people, so what is it? Are we being depopulated? I'm like, well, so what that reveals is they're not worried about running out of people. Like Matt Walsh. Yeah, Matt Walsh is one of these types. I kind of called him out on it. You know, we're running out of the birth rate's going down. But I'm like, but you're also anti-immigration. Why don't you just say you want more white babies? Because that's what they really mean. They're not worried about so this is how I'm proving my point here. For years, Alex Jones says they're going to depopulate us. They're going to kill us all. Bill Gates, a depopulation. Well, the depopulation conspiracy theory was soft-sawing everybody on white genocide. Because it was never about humanity being depopulated. It was always only about whites being depopulated. White genocide. Which, again, is a hoax. There is no white genocide. I'm a white Holocaust denier. And the reason why the woke right has adopted the idea that they're being genocided is because they went from white supremacist to white victims. Their whole premise is they're victims. They say the Jews are oppressing us. The reason why this is also another part of the thing I've noticed with them, is they hate blacks, but they don't talk about it because they actually fear blacks. But they believe that Jews brought the blacks to kill whites. The white nationalist types, the Nick Fuentes, they call blacks a biological weapon. They say the Jews brought them here to kill us. They also hate women. But you don't hear them talking about, like David Polk, who's talking about how much he hates blacks. He also hates women, but they don't talk about that because they got wives and sisters and moms and girlfriends. So they can't be blatant about who they hate. So they can focus on Jews because it's like a soft target and they're not going to get the blowback.